Au tutahi o te rā, i te mana whenua, te whānau o Ngāti Muki kei te mihi ki a koe. Koutou mā tēnā hoki tātou. Thank you, Julian, and we're really doing our best to tahuais him, as you can see. So it's a delight to be able to have Julian here today to be the front runner and bring us onto the stage. Look, before I begin my kōrero, there's a couple of things, and it is about raising stars, and I've been absolutely sort of swirling and passionate as I've heard from Mark Solomon to Professor, and also Charisma in relation to raising stars. The passion in which our speakers have talked about children, young people, families and communities, and about finding the best in them, if it's about language, if it's about education, if it's raising families. I think the conference is set for a wonderful occasion to really be teasing our thinking about, as contributors in our institutions or our organisations, what we're going to do to pivot and actually keep raising those stars. And in talking about raising stars, we were absolutely delighted this week to hear that Charisma has been appointed to Te Taurāwhiti, the Māori Language Commission, and I think that's a wonderful achievement, not only for her being a mum, for her in terms of her passion of kotahi mano kaika, and she didn't actually say that she runs a bigger part of the organisation, which is actually about our culture and identity, and the language is part of our culture and identity, and if we cannot preserve, protect and find ways to innovate and take that forward, then we don't have a happening thing in terms of tahutanga. So my absolute delight in seeing Charisma being raised to be one of these humble stars, so to speak. And the other message I want to convey to Charisma is that 7, 9 and 15, even when they're 24, they continue to do the same sorts of things as they did when they were children, so it doesn't stop there. Look, I'm not a digital native, so I will battle on with the technology that's in front of me, and you'll see from some of the statistics later on that you'll probably see the category that I fit into, which would encapsulate why I'm not a digital native. But I do want to congratulate the conference conveners for thinking about coming to Ōtautahi in terms of post-quake and looking at how we may revitalise, innovate and look at ourselves in terms of not only the education sector but also that across, and I think Professor, you called it the matatini, in terms of integration across all parts of our well-being, and this forum is an occasion for us to think about what we are going to do, not only in our singular way of working, but now in our broader scheme of things. From the post-2010 earthquake, from the series of danger events, from the catastrophic event itself, up through those events came a lot of opportunity, came a lot of sadness, but also came a lot of opportunity. It came organically, it came from an emergency point of view, but actually it forced us, for those of us working in institutions, to start thinking differently, to start looking at who is around us and actually looking at doing things in a much smarter way. So when we think about it from a tribal point of view, it was the catalyst for us to start thinking about how can we be doing things differently. And Charisma talked about the language this morning, kotahi mano kaika, kotahi mano wawata, and we think about the 1,000 homes speaking te reo Māori. It's forced our institution, Te Rūnanga o Ngāi Tahu, to be looking at, are we really serious about this? And if we are serious about it, why are we only so far along the continuum, and what are the sorts of things that we have to do to embrace this more, to get behind this and consolidate and embrace it in a much broader manner. And it means actually just not looking at it in the language in the isolation. It's about creating children, families, communities and groups where language can flourish itself. So The earthquake itself did spur us on and actually got us to start thinking differently. It got us to start collaborating and talking with one another and looking to see if we can do things differently and actually hearing the voices of our other professions as opposed to actually hearing our own voice within our own profession. Look, Te Rūnanga has played a strategic part in the recovery. As an iwi, we've been delighted at being able to be called one of the, it's sort of a boffiny speak, but I think a strategic partner in terms of the rebuild of Christchurch. And that strategic partner to Ngāi Tahu actually means, it means to us about finding our place, to be able to stand in our own place, have a say, and to be participating as a leader, as a partnering leader. And we're taking that sense of leadership and we're looking at fleshing that out and enabling that through other parts of our delivery across the broad spectrum of outcomes that we're expected to deliver. So in wanting to broaden ourselves and stretch ourselves, I think if we, as an organisation, we're looking at raising stars, we too have to look inwards and look at how we stretch ourselves. We have to look at our population and our young people coming forward and looking at maybe some of the things that we've been doing traditionally, institutionally, and looking at whether we have to pivot to actually meet these new generations coming along. And sometimes that means actually looking at our own attitude. It also means looking at what knowledge we have or looking at broader knowledge and actually building a wider spectrum of skills. There we go. So we know our tribal pathway is rich in history. We also know that the settlement didn't begin in 1998. And our tūpuna set that scene post-treaty. And our tribal leaders today, as we've moved from post through to today, they've actually got a responsibility to preserve, to protect, to manage and to grow the Ngāi Tahu presence. These young people who you see here, they want to know what they're aiming for. They want to know and they want to feel and they want to be able to participate in terms of looking at their whole well-being around being Ngāi Tahu. So we have a responsibility to actually as leaders, take this forward and look carefully and clearly into what enables young people to grow, to be a star and to be raised as a leader. Some more statistics, and you've heard from Tāmark this morning and also Charisma. We know that the census in 2013 tells us that we have just under 55,000 Ngāi Tahu who call themselves Ngāi Tahu, who can whakapapa and who can affiliate to Ngāi Tahu. Just under half of those 55,000 are actually based or live in Te Waiponamu. And for our strategic and our sort of implementation and our organisation purposes, it's really important for us to actually geographically know where our spread is, to look at the demographics and to begin to plan where we're going to invest our distribution. And we know since settlement, since 1998, we've invested over $320 million back into Ngāi Tahu, into the community and into society as a whole. And I did have the opportunity to say to the Minister of Finance recently that actually that's our investment into the economy, and you should be thanking and you should be looking at how responsibly iwi are taking this distribution and growing children, families and communities, because it means less people to be taken care of through the government. So he was had a little bit of a grin on his face, didn't say much more. Look, just under 55,000 of those tahu are under a third of them are under the age of 15. And that really gives us a clearer emphasis on what are we doing in terms of these young people under 15, and where are we pitching our outcomes, our intended outcomes. What will life be like for them in 2025 and 2050 as opposed to today? And actually, are we the right people to be focused on looking at those aspirations, and where is the voice of the young person? We know that the median age is about 24, and the median age of the country in terms of New Zealanders is 38, so we are a relatively young tribe. And when we look at our distribution each year, we have to think about proportionately where those funds are sitting. And when we think about across the broader spectrum of the numbers of Ngāi Tahu, you can see that, you know, in terms of 3 categories, and I think I just made it into that 3rd category there, that the youthfulness of this tribe, which does mean we have to seriously think about where our energy goes, where our funding goes, and if we've heard one example there in terms of creating speakers of Te Reo Māori, and in terms of the education aspect, which you are here for today, we should be thinking seriously about our investment into education. And I'm delighted to be able to say that over the past 3 years, we've actually increased our investment into education itself 300%, which really, from my point of view, it sounds like it's a lot of money if we're distributing up to $40 million in this financial year. But really, it was peanuts when I first took a look at it. And I thought to myself, if we've really got our hand on heart and head, and we're actually saying we're investing in our children and young people in education, then we actually need to do something about this in terms of putting funding into that. And not only putting funding into it, but taking rationale, knowledge and information to our decision makers to actually get them to forecast out and see that there is more to some of the things that they're interested in, and it should be about their children and their mokopuna. So you've heard Mark talk about the population of the country itself. So in terms of a learning institution such as yours, the dynamic or the changing dynamics of the demographics across the country is going to broadly change. We're looking at a cultural diversity, a change in terms of being from that monoculture, and I did hear earlier that we're not out of that colonial grip. But what we are moving to is a more diverse population. And if we're moving to a more diverse population, it really does mean that we have to think about what we are teaching, how we're teaching, the lifestyles, the families that are coming to our country or who are born in our country that have a diverse cultural background, as opposed to that traditional monocultural background. And it really leads us to be thinking, how should we as Ngāi Tahu be engaged in that? Because we know that not all Ngāi Tahu children families will be pure Ngāi Tahu. They'll be linked into other cultures and other ethnicities. So we also have to diversify and think about what we deliver. So what is it for the future then? So I've talked a little bit about children, young people. You know, there is this, having raised I'm a parent of a Gen Y who continues to be disruptive and innovative and have a voice sometimes lying around, but his sense of diversity really challenges me. And if I think about it as a baby boomer, you know, we've given birth to these disruptors, and we've enabled them to be challengers. And I don't want him to lie down. He said to me, "Mum, I don't want to go through life asleep. I actually want to make a contribution. I want to go out there and make some change." And what happened? He developed his own organic whiskey distillery, and that's not what I had in mind. So recently we were attending a conference where I heard one of the speakers talking about, thinking about the future, that there is a sense that we're actually going to live longer. And at the moment, you know, and I think about how I was brought up. We're brought up in a sense of, you know, 3 stages of life, which is about getting an education, getting a job, and then retiring. The feedback that I heard at this recent conference is that young people won't be happy with that. It will bore them. And my son did say, Mum, I'm not going to be like you and Dad, just get a job and just do steady things. I actually want to do something, make a difference, and then go on and transform and participate. And their learning, his learning, will be about not only educating and informing himself, but it will be about participating, and it will be learning on the job. And it will be about that constant transformation, and that's what will keep his energy, his enthusiasm, his sense of passion alive. And I do expect him to go on and do those sorts of things, as you would with your children and your own moko. So we don't expect that we're going to retire at 65 when we think into the future. You know, 80 will probably be the new retiring age, and people will live towards 100. And so you can think that if we're born into a sense of actually educating, getting a job, and then retiring, what do you do after retiring? What we're thinking about now, and what we should, I should be thinking about after retiring, and I'm already thinking about what I'm going to be doing after being a CEO at this organisation. It's about transforming myself and the sorts of smaller niche opportunities that I can get into. So if we're going, as a tribe, you know, the challenges, young people we expect are going to be living longer, they're going to be enthused and looking at that sense of transforming continuously. We know that migration will bring a sense of diversity to this country, and our learning and our teaching has to shape this generation that is coming, not only Y but Z. And I don't know what comes after Z, but they'll be coming as well. They're also going to face increasing global challenges, which are abound at the moment. And they're going to be thinking globally. So when we think about, not only think about, but we participate in being digital, they're already digital. We're attempting to be digital. I can only do a couple of things on my phone, but young people, your children can do so much more. And we actually have to have our ear to the ground and be watching 360 as to what's going on in the world. Young people will be flexible about their jobs, and the other thing that Ngāi Tahu has to think about is that education itself is not just in one particular sector, it's lifelong. And one of the things that astounded me with Rūnanga was that we focused predominantly in 1 or 2 areas of education, primarily tertiary and some compulsory, but only from a compulsory point of view, getting in behind and trying to do the rah-rah thing with Ministry of Education, not strategically banging on the door of the Minister of Education and looking at our Article 2 responsibilities and challenging about Article 3 responsibilities. We weren't doing those sorts of things, and we now have a responsibility to kick into this. The other thing that we weren't doing was actually addressing this early childhood sector. And you all know in your own homes, in terms of raising your child or your moka, they're the most mokopuna, they are the most precious to you. Everything will go into thinking about that child's future. Why weren't we doing that as a tribe? So I am pleased to see that this year that we have increased our budget 3-fold, and we're starting on that pathway, and we are learners in that. If we are going to be thinking and delivering and implementing more broadly around this change in education and thinking more widely in terms of integrating right across the wellbeing, the most unique thing about our Māoridom is our cultural perspective. It's us, our tahutanga, our Māoriness, and is us. And if we are going to be consistent in growing and developing our own cultural aspirations, we have to find a way to fuse, immerse, and actually practice this in our teaching and our learning. Not only in our own homes, as Charisma explored, but in our learning institutions, in our organisations, and that means within our organisations such as Te Rūnanga, because we know that well-being is not only just about one particular part, it's actually about a collection of integrated aspects, as Professor spoke to us about this morning. All of those things in terms enhance our character, and I say that there are three domains that we should be concentrating on in terms of growing leaders, and that is looking at competencies, growing a sense of competency, knowledge and information, and enabling young people to become competent. The element and the notion and the practice of compassion. Having that sense of compassion, that ability to stand and walk in somebody else's shoes is absolutely critical so that we know where each other is coming from. And the third dimension is that it's our character, what shapes our character, and actually they are the values that we're brought up with, that we're surrounded with in terms of our own home, our own social system, our own cultural system. And if we can work on those 3 C's together, we're going to turn out well-rounded, capable, competent, compassionate young people who are going to be stars and future leaders. So, talking a little bit about the organisation, I haven't even been there 3 years, and I'm forming these opinions that we're traditionally conservative as our tribes move through grievance, and they move from grievance, and that won't be overnight. You know, that's actually generational, and where we might feel and think that we've left it behind, a lot of it still rubs off on us in terms of our attitude, and to actually move from grievance to actually looking at being proactive and strengths is very, very difficult. I live in a 3-generational household, and I'll come home and I'll say something, the other generation's got something else to say about it, and so has the other generation. So to be able to move from grievance, we've actually got to be able to have those conversations, open, constructive, debating conversations, and with Ngātis in the home, and Tahus in the home, and tūwharetoa, and yes, a bit of ngāpui. We've got that going on when we've got everyone coming home. But our iwi has to be, we have to be listeners. You know, the average age of our, and I see my boss is left, but the average age of our governance, our tribal council, is probably 55 to 60. And if we are going to be cultivating leaders, you know, I'm challenging them to think about what their succession plans are, and where are the young people. If we've got people at our leadership table, where are the 40s, the 50s and the 40s, and that we're going to end up skipping 2 or 3 decades to be able to bring those leaders through. So we've actually got to be innovative, we've got to challenge ourselves in our attitude, we've got to be innovative, and actually we've got to start stepping out and becoming more flexible, and actually listen, stop and listen to young people and what other people have to say. Sometimes that's quite hard to be able to do. So, you know, there is this sense of new thinking that I'm trying to weave through with our leadership, looking at divesting new ways of learning, broadening our learning from early childhood right through to kaumātua, looking at investing, enabling investing locally and with whānau, as opposed to being a centralist. Too often people look at the institution or the organisation of Te Rūnanga o Ngāi Tahu and they think it's all a happening thing there. In actual fact, the happening thing is out there in the communities, and our role is actually to get alongside, partner, invest and enable our communities to be the best they can, not to actually do it for them. A couple of other slides just to finish off. And in creating, one of the things that we're thinking of, and not only thinking but getting into the space of, if we're going to create and enable, empower young people, families and communities, we actually have to think about this notion of a tribal economy or an economic base, which we all have in our own homes. It's also thinking about looking at tribal assets and enabling teaching, learning, so that our whānau in the regional and local sense can actually administer those tribal assets. And it's also about finding tools or ways to support whānau to be able to be participants in managing their own economies. And broadening these pathways, it does mean actually building our own capacity and our own capability. So we're continuously looking at ways to widen, to enable our participation in workforce, not only externally but also across our own internal organisations. A couple of examples I want to give you today, which I think will probably be touched on later on and have grown up as part of the post-earthquake, is he toki ki te reka, in terms of seizing that opportunity and bringing alive the post-earthquake and resurrecting the what you probably would have known as the trade training opportunities, taking opportunity and partnering with learning institutes as well as organisations to build a strength in our apprenticeships. And the other one is within our own organisations, Whenua Kura, which we've partnered with Lincoln University to actually grow our own in the agricultural sector, given that we have invested into farming. So there are just a couple of opportunities that I think others will speak about later on today. But it's actually about seizing that moment, taking the opportunity, looking internally, looking at ourselves, and finding ways to be different and to bring young people forward in a range of learning opportunities, because these young people need to be the young people of our future, who need to be young people who are confident, who are going to have that courage, who can adapt, given there's this flexibility that they will have in terms of transforming over their lives, and most of all, they're going to have strong expectations. So thank you. It's just an opportunity to share where we're at today. Kia ora.